Good afternoon. My name is Alan Nochumson, and I'm with Nochumson P.C. We're a real estate boutique law firm in Center City, Philadelphia. And the type of clientele we have is someone like Pollock Shaw of Open Spaces. Welcome today, Pollock.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Yeah, so Pollock's been a client for, I would say, at least 2 years, maybe 3 years.
Yeah, I've known you for more than that.
Yeah, so what we do is, and we were talking about this before, like when we went live. We try to nurture our relationships with individuals and clients because real estate's all about relationships, and it's as much as who you know, as much as what you know as who you know, and we try to really grow up with our clientele, and Pollock was a client 2 or 3 years ago. She started out her portfolio, and I mean she's one of the more dynamic and amazing clients we do have. And I thought it would be really good for our audience to hear a little bit what Pollock's doing in terms of being able to maintain and build a real estate portfolio during COVID-19. So Pollock, why don't you just introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alan. Alan has been amazing. I think I knew of him maybe 8, 10 years ago when we bought a property and there was a tax abatement that went wrong, and Alan came and took over and fixed it. And then, I don't know, 8 years later, I dove into real estate full time and then reached out to Alan again to represent me. He's made some amazing connections for me, not just from the legal standpoint, but also from growth. So yeah, I really appreciate working with him. Yeah, so my name is Pollock. I'm the owner and founder of Open Spaces Capital, and Open Spaces Capital has grown from 0 to 4 million in the last 3 years. So we hold a $4 million real estate portfolio in Philadelphia, and I have another business, which is Open Spaces Portfolio Program, where we teach other people to do the same thing. So to give you like a quick background, I'm a mechanical engineer. I worked in corporate for 17 years. And then when I had kids, I didn't want to do all the commuting and traveling anymore, and was looking for some flexibility. But instead ended up becoming a full-time real estate investor and grew the portfolio in the past 3 years. So that's kind of my journey.
Okay, great. So now, how has your portfolio handled the stress of COVID-19?
Yeah, so this is a really good litmus test. I think the current conditions for any real estate investing strategy, and we have really been I've really been big. We started investing in our late 30s, and you come into it with a different mindset. And I've really been big on investing in a low risk way. Um, so we really haven't seen that much of an impact. I run most of my business virtually. We don't over leverage, and I have a one-on-one relationship with all of my tenants. So we haven't been impacted. Things have been smooth so far.
So in terms of rentals, like have you seen, at least in your portfolio or word on the street about how tenants or if tenants are paying their rent?
So tenants are having a tougher time paying rents, but we do very rigorous screening, and I got 95% of my rents this month.
Oh, that's awesome.
So far, so good. Yeah.
So, like in terms of what you do in terms of screening tenants, like what are the couple things that you really focus on that you think are helpful in making sure that your tenants, pay rent?
Yeah, so a few things I look for is income to be 3 times the rent, for them to have paid first month's rent, last month's rent, and 1 month's rent security deposit when they move in. We do checks with their previous landlords. We do income verification. I call their employer and find out, what kind of employee they are. So a lot of different things, different strategies to check their background. Of course, credit, criminal, eviction check, which are the basic checks. So, and also just generally throughout their time with us, I really try to give them really good service. And I feel like letting them know that, we're not like a big corporation, we're a small landlord, and their rent impacts us, really helps let them know that, this isn't something where the other party doesn't have any impact on it, right? So knowing that and having been treated well throughout the course of the past few years really helps.
Okay. So when you're looking at an asset like, pre-COVID, like
Yeah.
what were the things that you were looking at as something that's a viable asset that you're going to purchase?
So my strategy is value add investing. So what we do is we buy distressed properties, renovate them, rent them out, and then I pull all the cash out and move it to a different property while still having that cash flowing asset in my portfolio. So that's the strategy that I employ, and we go through a lot of calculations to make sure the numbers would work. And then what was the next question? How are we doing now?
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
how's the equation change now that we're during COVID, and how do you anticipate it's going to change once we get out completely from COVID?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what I'm doing, and what I would advise anybody to do, is one is not to try and play the market. Um, Really, no, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't really know which way it's going to go. So try not to play the market. And what we're doing is the after repair value of what we think the property is going to be worth when we get done with it, based on the comparative market analysis. We drop that by 10%, and then do our calculations that way. And that means negotiating a little bit more than before to make sure that when we are at the other end of our cycle of the process that we do, when we come to get the property refinanced with a bank, when they send out an appraiser, if the prices have dropped by 10%, we're still okay.
Gotcha. Have you identified or purchased properties like uh, during this crisis?
So we just turned over a 10-unit building with a few tenants left and new ones moved in because their leases ended. We finished construction on 2 duplexes, and they got rented out last month. And then we started construction on a single family, and we're negotiating a 12-unit deal right now.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, and you'll hear from me when we when we get to that point.
So, is that going to be a finance deal?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And I'm sure we all know the certain players in town that handle those transactions.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a little bit of hesitancy or pushback in terms of, pre-COVID versus COVID, with regards to your financing options?
Yeah, so in speaking with lenders, so what I'm learning is that they are also dropping the ARV, just like I was saying, the after repair value of what they think the property is going to be worth 3, 6, 9 months down the line. And then the other thing I've noticed is the interest rates are great right now, but it's not as easy to borrow. So, there might be higher closing costs and points that we have to offer to be able to get that rate. And then the third thing is lenders are asking for us to bring a little more equity than they did before.
Yeah. Well, they want more skin in the game. They're concerned like that if people are not paying rent, and to be honest, that's what we've seen too. I mean, from a legal standpoint, one of the things I don't think that investors have looked enough at, is what the rent rolls are at on the closing date. A lot of times you'll see these agreements of sale. They're required to provide the rent rolls. They're required to assign these leases. They're required to the property owner is required to give the security deposit and the advance rent, like last month's rent. But one of the practice points, and here's a free piece of legal advice, is to really put in your agreements that if there are a certain amount of defaults, there need to be repercussions, because the lenders are looking at that. So they want to make sure that people are current, on the day of closing, like the tenants are. And if they're not, that can push it back into underwriting. So one of the practice points that I would definitely put out there is that people need to focus more and more on the agreements of sale to have certain type of conditions precedent in order to go to closing.
That's a really great tip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
So
like
one thing, because we know that evictions aren't, sorry, I interrupted you.
no, that's fine.
Well, because we know that evictions are hard right now in case a tenant doesn't pay rent, and because I don't pick the tenants that we inherit when we purchase a property, we've been really trying to negotiate obtaining these properties that need work vacant,
That's
and
right.
that's what we're trying to do. Um, just because I think it would be really hard to like take over something and the tenant still doesn't trust you. They don't, you really haven't made their life easier yet for them to understand that the property needs work. And yeah, so that's what we've been trying to do, is negotiate obtaining vacant properties. But I really like your tip on if we did.
Yeah, if you took an
um,
occupy, because I know from the past you have taken on these properties
yeah, we used
occupied.
to.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then obviously you have certain rights to evict a tenant.
right,
A lot of the properties that I see you take over and a lot of my clients take over, they're month-to-month tenancies, right?
right,
So you can evict, as long as you have good cause, and we've come across that, the good cause
right,
eviction. But you have certain rights. But here in COVID, actually, you cannot initiate or file an eviction until July 10th
right,
in Philadelphia County. So, and then there's even more conditions if the property owner has like some certain type of financing with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and they're in a forbearance. So it really is hard. So that's something to consider when you're taking on an occupied property, to
and
look at the lack of ability to evict.
yeah, and the tenants that we have put in our properties, I've never had to evict them. Um, but the truth of the matter is, if we are getting into properties that are distressed, and that one you're talking about, where there was so much lead in the property that the child um, had health issues because of it, we do need the tenant to move out, and that's when we have to take steps like evictions to really make sure everybody's safe, and so we can do the work and make the property safe.
That's right. And especially now that it's harder and harder to evict, like you mentioned, the fact about lead-based paint. You buy a property that's been built before 1978, and there's a child that's living there under the age of 6 years old, there needs to be lead-based paint certifications. And I
Right,
believe that law has been expanded just in general.
right,
And it's going to be, again, certain sections of the city are going to see it more than others, but it's going to be across the board. If you have a property built before 1978, you need a lead-based paint certification. So these
whether a
are
child lives there or not, right?
right. That's right. So there's a lot of hoops to go through when you're buying a lot of these distressed or impacted properties, where probably the property owner that you're buying from hasn't done things probably 100% the right way, but you do
Right.
want to do it the right way.
Right, exactly. And sometimes it's not as easy as paint and cleaning, right? Sometimes we do have to do full renovation to really make it safe, and then you don't have a choice.
Yeah. Now, so how have you been dealing with some maintenance? Like, have you had any issues? Because, before there was no construction work allowed except for emergencies and for maintenance. So, but let's just talk about the maintenance part. Have you had pushback? What protective measures have you put in place to make sure that you can do responsible maintenance of some of your properties?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I run my entire property management side of the business virtually,
Hmm.
and I have a VA who's based in a different state, and she understands how I do my business, and she kind of helps coordinate everything.
Hmm.
And during the time when only emergency construction was allowed, we let all our tenants know that unless it's an emergency, we're going to defer. So they put all their maintenance requests through our tenant portal, so we
Hmm.
let them know that if you do put in a request, feel free to put in a request. We're going to defer it until it's safe for us to enter the property.
Hmm.
If it is something emergency maintenance related, we have had a hard time finding people who would be willing to go out and do the work. And then when we've asked tenants to leave the property. Thankfully, it's not too cold right now, to leave the property so that the maintenance person can do the work and then come out, and they have swapped places in the property with them.
That's
And
right.
then now it's a little bit, we're asking people to just maintain social distancing.
Yeah, I've recommended to a lot of my landlord clients, even in the showing of certain properties, because showings are allowed now.
Yeah.
That and you do need social distancing, but
Right.
keep for showings, keep the closet doors open, keep all the interior doors of the property open, keep all the windows open, have it as minimal as possible that anyone needs to touch anything
Touch anything.
other than the front door of the property,
Right.
and then follow up after a showing or after a maintenance request with the proper sanitizer or sanitation of whoever was there. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's so we rented out 4 units, so 2 duplexes when all of this was really, when all of this was going on. And we had to do it in a way that the showings were spaced out. So no 2 people showed up at the same time. And none of us were present at the property. So we used a lockbox whose code changed every 15 minutes. And so just for safety of the property itself. And then we let tenants do self showings.
yeah. Now I know you're one to actually leverage technology, and it's ever so more important during, COVID-19 has taught us, what, technology is good. There's ways to
Yeah.
streamline a situation and actually save expenses. So you mentioned a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
What other types of technology? I know a lot of my clients use like property management systems to keep themselves organized. Do you use any of those property management systems?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've used a property management system since the very beginning. So I used to use when I first got started, used a free option. Now I use one with all the bells and whistles. We do, everything is done online. Um, we have to train all our tenants to be able to enter maintenance requests through it. All the lease signing is done through it. Everything is done through even work orders we can create through our system, send them to our different vendors who can go and fix things if we need to. Everything is done through that. I have a VA who manages all of that. She makes sure everybody stays on track. When it comes to construction too, we've been as virtual as we can be. So trying to avoid as much of the hands-on pieces that we can. So what I started doing was, a lot of investors go out and buy the material for their contractors, and then they set them up, and then they go off on their own way. So what we started doing was we started putting a list of finishes together and asking the contractor to quote everything
That's
in
right.
one shot. That way, that takes away a lot of the coordinating, all the bookkeeping, all of the stuff that's associated with working with a contractor.
And I'm sure economies of scale and familiarity with these materials and finishes
Yeah.
create a certain image of like this is an open spaces property, right?
Right.
And
Trying not to be creative with it. Just
no, but
same
if,
thing.
if if it works, right,
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
know how these finishes are, you're comfortable with the layout. Like, do you use the
Yeah.
same contractor all the time too, or do you bid
Yeah.
out?
So far we've used the same contractor. He has a crew of 8 and we just retain him full time. But yeah, we use granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, all high-end finishes, but it's the same thing every time.
I'm a big believer of not recreating the wheel. I'm
Yeah.
like, if it works, drive it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sometimes like when I post photos of my kitchens and bathrooms on social media, I wonder like people must be thinking like this is the same thing you posted last week. Well, it's a different one, but everything looks the same.
But that's a good thing. I mean, as long as I see your stuff. As long
Yeah.
I mean, you choose nice materials, you
Yeah.
choose durable materials, which
Right.
I would think is really important for rentals because there's a difference
Absolutely.
between materials you would use for sale as opposed for rent, right?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, it doesn't make that much of a price difference when it comes to construction to just bump up your finishes that much, but it makes for a much nicer rental.
gotcha. Now, have you thought about going into the for sale arena?
No, we sold a couple of properties that had a lot of equity in them last year, but no, I think with the strategy, our strategy. With our strategy, I can pull all of the cash I invested in it out and then some, and there's no taxes on it because uh, it is a loan, it's a mortgage, so it's much more, I think, lucrative actually than even flipping. And then I still keep the property and collect the cash flow every month.
Gotcha. Now, do you focus on certain areas of the city in terms of your investment opportunities?
Yeah, we really like South Philly, and then now we've moved over more to the Northeast.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. Is that where you're going to focus a lot of your attention over the next few years?
Yeah, I think so. Northeast Philly and maybe Cobbs Creek.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. Now, working at home is not the easiest. I'm literally, as I told you before our call, I got relegated to the couch. Usually, I sit in the kitchen on a table. I have my computer propped up on a throw pillow, so that's why there's a little movement back and forth, which is nice. I'm sitting on the couch. So I know, and I have kids just like you. Your kids are a little bit younger. How you handling like running a business at home with the kids at home full time?
That's interesting, right? All of us are doing it somehow. Yeah, my kids. So one good thing with having really young children, my kids are 3 and 5. So we don't have the homeschooling aspect. And I'm just like, go have fun. This is your fun time. Like, this is your time. Be home, have fun. We do every few days, we'll sit down and do something that they can learn from, so they're ready for my daughter, especially, she's 5, she's ready for kindergarten. But yeah, my husband and I have just been swapping childcare responsibilities with each other. And he has a full-time job, and my work is a little more flexible than his, so I kind of work in the morning and at night more. Yeah, we've got an entire space that has desks and work stuff and chairs, and it's on a different floor, so so that we can keep the play and the work separate.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you know what? And again, I think you said you started this, business because you want to, work and home balance, right, and flexibility. So
Right.
it just now highlighted it even more with
Right.
COVID-19. So we're all experiencing that,
Right.
right?
Everybody's going through the same thing. I just feel like we just all do our best. And um yeah, I actually feel like this is a really good time to re-strategize how you want your life to be. This is a good time to get out of the daily routine and kind of look at your life from a third party perspective, re-strategize and reinvent yourself. It's
That's
not easy, but this is a good time to do it.
That's right. So if I'm talking to you 5 years from now, like how's your business going to expand and or change?
Um, so this is a time when I'm really focusing on how to exponentially grow in the next year.
Gotcha.
So you'll see, I don't know, my goal is to double our portfolio in the next few years,
Mhm.
and also help more people do the same thing I'm doing, grow our coaching side of the business.
Yeah, why don't you tell me a little? I mean, I see your posts. Like you've had a lot of interesting posts of former students who have like graduated from your program and who are now also full-fledged investors. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your program so people can know about your program, and if they're interested, they can reach out to you as well.
Yeah, so I always say, like, there's 3 types of real estate investors, right? So the first one is that comes into real estate investing early on in their life, and they become a real estate investor as a way to create a career. And then you see a lot of DIY projects and how to save money and how to acquire a lot of different skill sets.
That's
Then
right.
there's this other investor that has money to invest, but they're like, I don't want anything to do with the actual investing. Just give me a little bit of return every month, and I'm happy. I don't want to deal with the actual day to day.
All
And then there's
my clients love the one you just mentioned.
yeah, yes. And then there is people like me in the middle. So what people like me do is, we've had a career. We came into real estate investing because we didn't like the quality of life that the career gave us.
Mhm.
And so the growth mindset is a little bit different when you come, in your 30s into real estate investing. And so what I do is I teach real estate investing from the perspective of scalability and systems and processes, and how to take the funds you have and grow it exponentially into a portfolio. So that's what the program is. It's for a very small subset of the population who really wants to focus on the quality of life and scale a portfolio. That's what I focus on.
You mean real estate investing is not like an HGTV show? Just don't buy a house and like you just say I'll wing it and I'll just like knock down a wall and then all of a sudden I make a ton of money at the end.
I know, right? That would be, yeah, I don't want to be going to Home Depot at 6 a.m. every day. I want my kid to wake me up and complain about it instead.
So a little bit about the class, like what's the program, like, so people can understand.
Yeah, so we do, right. So I do it, it's a virtual program, meaning we do it over Zoom. We always did it, even pre-COVID, we did it over Zoom. And it's a small group of people, and I personally teach the strategy. And it's very step-by-step, just the way I am, very step-by-step, I give you my entire framework, and it's based on the SCALE framework. So SCALE's an acronym. I can, once I'm back on Facebook, I can pop it in the comments in the Facebook Live if anybody's interested in taking a look. But yeah, it's based on my entire framework. My entire blueprint is all step by step. And so it's based on 3 pillars. So the first one is the framework itself. The second one is live coaching. So we meet every week, and I personally teach. And the third one is accountability and support. So we're a community. We really help each other move forward, and it's been amazing. It's a really great group of people who really help each other, empower each other.
Yeah, well, I was impressed by the people who gave testimonials, recently about, and we have some Facebook friends in common I've seen. So I know they've been very happy with the program and have now started investing themselves. So
yeah,
which is a good thing.
Love seeing, people go from zero investing experience to like their second, third, fourth property. Love seeing that.
Great. So now we come to the end, and now if any of my audience want to like talk to you further, we'll learn a little bit more about how to continue and build a real estate portfolio, or even take one of your, take your program in terms of how to do that. How can they reach it?
The best way to keep track of me is to follow me on Instagram at Open Spaces Women. But we're not just for women, but the handle is Open Spaces Women.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was so informative. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great. I need to get the mic though that you have. You look so much more professional.
It's so big.
It looks great. I'm telling you, you look like you're set up and everything.
It's like in the way.
Yeah.
You can hear you just fine though.
Cool. All right. Have a great day. Enjoy the weather.
Thanks. You too, Alan.
I'll see you. All right. Bye.